Hi again. Here, let's continue working on our app here. And we got our movie displayed in the details view, but our detail view only shows the name. So why don't we also show the other data that we have here, like the year and the director, right? So what we'll do is we'll go to our storyboard, find the detail view. Okay, let's also, you notice in that last video that the label went off the edge of the screen when it was too long. Let's try and take care of that. So I'll drag my label out to the edge here. I'm going to snap it to the guides there, right? And what I'll need to do now is add a constraint. So you can see the orange is telling me like, hey, there's not enough constraints to make this label here the way you want it. And so what's going to happen is the dashed line is kind of showing me where it's going to end up. Even though I drag the edges here, when we run the app, it's actually just going to be this inner outline with the dashed line. So what we'll do is we'll add a constraint on the left and the right edge, okay? And you can do that with the pin menu. So here's the pin menu, and I'm going to pin the left edge and the right edge. These say 0, even though the distance here is not 0. But the reason why is because we have this little checkbox here that says constrained margins. And when I drag this, you may have noticed that there was a little blue line there. When I dragged it over, it snapped to that blue line. That's kind of an invisible margin that's there. And so when I snap to that margin, the constraints kind of think like, oh, you wanted to be connected to that margin. So it checks this box, constrained to margins, and the distance here is the distance to the margin. And since I snap to the margin, I'm 0 pixels away from the left margin and 0 from the right margin, right? So anyway, just select these two red lines there and click Add to Constraints. Okay, and that should fix this label. Okay, now the label, the text will still be too large and it will extend outside the area of the label. We can set a setting on the label here. I'm going to change the property here for auto shrink. So I'm going to go to my properties here with the label selected. So it should say, label at the top. And then I'm going to find auto shrink, and it says fixed font size. So that means the font is always the same size no matter what happens. But instead, what I'm going to choose is I'm going to choose minimum font scale. Okay, so this says that the font will shrink to stay inside the label. So in other words, the letters will get smaller as the words get longer. Okay, and so that way if we have too much text to fit in here, what will happen is it'll shrink down until it fits up to a point, right? So it'll the default setting here is 0.5, so it can be up to half the size of the text there. And if it's, if it still doesn't fit in there when it's half font size, then it'll bleed off the edges, right? But anyway, so we'll use that option for now. And then why don't we make another label, right? So I'm going to grab a label here, and I'll snap it underneath like this, right? And we can kind of do the same thing we did with the other one. Why don't we snap it to the left edge and snap it to the right edge? And then maybe I'll align the text in the center. And let's go to the first or the second one here. It's the align menu. And let's align our actually, you know what we can do, since we've got it snapped to the left and right edges, we don't even need align. What we'll do is we'll just go to the pin menu, and we'll pin the top, left, and right. And that should be enough to position this guy. And then now we need to put the year in there. Why don't we put the year underneath here? And before we snap this one, let's make the text a little bit bigger here like that. And you can do Command equal. If you make the text a little bigger and you do Command equal, it'll resize the size of the box so you can see the text. Because you saw a moment ago my box was too small to display the size of the text that I had when I increased the font size, right? So I'll do Command equal, just Command key and equal on the keyboard, and then I'll snap this one underneath the other label, okay? And then we'll add a couple constraints. So maybe I'll do the same thing. I'll drag this over to this side, drag this one over to this side, set the font to center align, so it'll be like name, director, and the year. okay? Why don't we do this? Why don't we type in name, so that'll be the name of the movie. This will be director, just to remind me. And then this will be year, okay? And so now let's add some constraints to this guy. So what we'll do is we'll do the same thing we did with the other one here. So we'll go to the pin menu, pin the left, top, and right. And then those 3 constraints should be enough, okay? Okay, so we've got these 2 new labels, and now we need an IB outlet to represent each of these labels. Okay, so essentially the IB outlet is a variable that references the objects here in Storyboard, okay? So hold the Option key and click on the Detail View Controller, okay? And let me resize this a little bit here, right? And what we need to do is we need to create another outlet. We've already got an outlet here, and we've got a mark showing us where we're keeping our outlets. So let's put the other outlets in the same area here, right below mark. So, and you can actually drag from if this isn't open, you can click this little button here, and you can drag from the labels here, and you can see now it says year, director, and title, okay? So maybe I'll drag from year and hold the Control key and drag into my Detail View Controller. And we'll make this year label. Okay, and then make sure that says UI label, right? And then that looks good. And then let's do it again. So we'll go to the director. I'll Control drag from director into my view controller and say director label. Okay, so that's pretty good. And then we can save, and then maybe what we'll do is we'll close the assistant editor by clicking this guy and switch to Detail View Controller. And there we go. So now to display the year and the director, we're already displaying the title, which is the name of the movie. Why don't we just go into our View Will Appear, and right here, if this view, when it loads or when it appears, if it has, if the movie property that we created here has a value, then we can get values from it like we did with the label or with the name, and we can do it with the other 2 labels. So let's say director label dot text equals movie dot, and then you can see movie has these 3 properties because we define them in the struct. So we can say director, and then we can say year label dot text equals movie dot year, right? So we'll save all that, and then we can test again. So I'll run the movie, and let's see what happens. Oh, you know what? This is remember, this was an integer, and we can't assign an int to a string. So why don't we do this? Put the quotation marks around this guy, and then do the slash and parentheses here to convert that into a string, right? So we can embed that in a string, and then this will be okay. So we'll test it again. And there we go. So let's see. This is Spinal Tap. Oh, it says this is Spinal Tap. Rob Reiner, 1984. We'll go Logan's Run. Michael Anderson, 1976. 2001: A Space Odyssey. Oh, look, and the text shrunk a little bit to fit the area. Stanley Kubrick, 1968. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So thanks for watching, and we'll continue and add a few features in the next video, okay?